Where are all the aliens? This is a serious question. It's the Fermi Paradox. If life is abundant in the universe, then why haven't we seen it? We have instruments now, we're doing a lot of scanning and listening and data analysis, and we haven't seen a thing. We found thousands of exoplanets now, but we still haven't found a trace of life. No Dyson spheres or anything particularly interesting aside from volcanic worlds and binary stars and, cool things from an astrophysics standpoint, but no life. So what gives? What's going on? Well, I have an answer that I'm guessing you haven't heard. We're doing it wrong. And we're doing it wrong in a specific way. We need to reimagine what we are looking for in terms of aliens. And what I have in mind is we should be looking not for aliens, but for alien. This has to do with consciousness. We should be looking for one large mind, not many minds. We haven't even gotten to another planet yet. We've barely scratched the surface of getting into space, and we're already pushing the limits of thought, integrating things into our minds, and now considering the possibility of becoming something like cybernetic, having things connected to our minds, and not just things in terms of our phone and the internet and whatnot, but also potentially other minds, other people. We see this with technology like Neuralink. So if it's possible to connect our minds to a computer so that we can play Pong and we can send information back and forth, scaling that up and making it possible to actually share a great deal with another person, it opens up an entire can of worms, the likes of which we've really never seen. Let's back up just a little bit. The extended mind theory in 1996 was proposed by David Chalmers and Andy Clark. In their paper, they described the process of integrating something into your mind, making it a part of your thought in a very visceral and real way, not a metaphorical way, not it's kind of like it was part of my thought. No, it actually becomes part of your thought. And David Chalmers' favorite example of this is his iPhone. The iPhone, in a very real way, becomes part of how we think. It's not just a tool that we think with, it is a tool that we think in and think through. It's something that has become part of the fabric of what it means for us to think. Now, this is just scratching the surface of this kind of thing, but the way this happened and the way that this happened with something like a phone, that it's not going to happen with something like a computer, is because we carry it around on us all the time. It's pervasive. It's integrated into all aspects of our lives. Simple knowledge recall, looking things up, thinking about things, thinking through things, how we make decisions, what restaurant to go to, how to get somewhere, what to order, who to talk to, all of these things. It is so thoroughly integrated in our consciousness that there is a distinct disconnect, almost very much like what we get with a cultural disconnect and going to a place that we're not familiar with. There's a sudden jarring discontinuity in terms of how we think. If suddenly we lose our phones and we're very accustomed to thinking through them, then it feels very awkward. We don't quite know how to think certain things because we have become so accustomed to thinking with them, in them, through them. So that's interesting. And you might not buy that. And of course, it's, I know David has a lot of fun talking about this, and that's all well and good. But there are more motivating things for thinking that this might actually be what's going on. Because it's not just the mind, it's also the body. Let's go back a little bit further now into the 1950s. With Maurice Merleau-Ponty, we get the idea that a blind man's cane is actually part of his thought, his vision, in fact. And this is borne out by the studies that came afterwards, looking at brain activity, looking at how it is that people were using these things. And indeed, someone who cannot see but is using a cane processes that information with the visual cortex. They are processing it as if they are seeing. In other words, they are seeing through the object. This gets even more pronounced and obvious when we consider the later advances where you have a series of pins such that the pins, these little prickly things, are connected to a camera. The camera gives you a intensity image, grayscale, and depending upon the intensity, it pokes you more or less. It's like one of those fun things that, you push your hand into and it leaves an impression of your hand, but it's nothing more than a giant network of pins. It's exactly the same kind of thing, but it's connected dynamically to a camera. The same kind of thing can be said for echolocation, including someone who is otherwise sighted who starts to learn to click with a blindfold on or in the dark, they can learn to click and determine where the items are around them and start to see. The same thing happens with respect to extensions of our arms. If I have something that extends my reach, the activation with respect to how I use that tool, whether something is about to touch the end of the tool, is processed just as if I'm about to touch it with my hands. If an object comes near the end of the tool, it's just like an object coming near my hands. In other words, we relate to the object in the same way that we relate to our physical bodies. We have all kinds of evidence for thinking that the brain is very plastic when it comes to being able to reimagine what the body is, how it is that we see, and then ultimately with the extended mind, how it is that we even think. Now, take that plasticity and combine it with something like Neuralink, where we are connected to other minds, and you end up with a situation where instead of a single mind, you have many minds together, coming together, blurring the boundaries between each other and merging in a way that we can only imagine right now. I'm of a mind in thinking that this is going to be something where we end up merging with the AI rather than it being, like the robot overlords or anything like that. I think we're going to be much more interested in making that a part of our thought, making it a part of our being, and then having our being transferred into and becoming very much enmeshed and a part of its being. And the net result of that, as all of these things conspire together, you end up with a kind of mass, almost planetary-like consciousness that's possible. So that you have all these different minds together with all of their boundaries blurred, you end up with one giant, essentially immortal consciousness. And we haven't even gotten to Mars yet. When we're looking for aliens, we should be looking for an alien. Because by the time it's possible for them to even think about creating a Dyson sphere or to do anything that's of a scale that we would actually notice, and then they're almost certainly going to have crossed this threshold. That's why I think that we're doing it wrong.